Hey everybody. So today I'm gonna do a little video on trying to make your code a little bit more concise. Just looking through some of the responses so far that I've seen and what you guys are doing. I'm seeing a very common theme that I actually see with a lot of beginner programmers. Um, in especially whenever you get into using user input and checking that user input. And one of the really common things I see is like using massive like if statements. If it's equal to this or it's equal to this or equal to this, and you have all these different conditionals, and your code ends up being, like 50, 60, 70 lines of code just to do like one check that you want to do. So for example, maybe you're just checking to see some input from the user. Maybe you want them to, enter a letter or something like that. I don't know, for some type of a game, maybe enter a letter or a number, and you want to see what number they're entering, or even it could be a key press. Um, the what I see a lot of is, okay, well, what I'm going to do here is I want to check if some input is, if they entered A, then do something. A was entered. I don't know, whatever task you might be trying to accomplish with this. And then you have else if, and then basically you get into this thing where you're starting to go, okay, I have to type every single letter. And anytime you start doing something like this, where it's like, yeah, I could copy and paste this and I have to change a couple things, but this is going to take forever. Anytime you get into something like that, you can probably use a list and a for loop to make it simpler, right? And so how can I do that with my code? So let's say I have some if block here. Basically, what I want to do is I want to create a list of my possible inputs that I want to be checking for. All right. And so in this case, I have, the letters A, the letter B, the letter C, the letter D. And even this actually can be done more simply in Python, listing out all the letters. Just do a quick Google search and you'll find that there's this library called string. And string has a function. Let's see if I can remember it. Dot ASCII lowercase. You can get ASCII letters, you can get lowercase or uppercase, and this actually gives you a list of all inputs. If we use the list function on this, so it returns like a range of letters, and if you use the list function on it, we'll actually print these out. And so just wanting to show you guys what that looks like. This is a nice little trick. Let's go ahead and run this. You can see, actually, I got a really, really cool list of all the possible inputs. I didn't even have to type them all out. I'm just using this ASCII lowercase function. There's a couple other ones. ASCII uppercase if you want uppercase, or if you want letters. Let's see what that looks like. You see it does all lowercase first and then all the uppercase after that. And so there's ways of generating these things a little bit more quickly. Sometimes it's, maybe it's something custom to yours. And so maybe there's not a quick way of doing this. But even still, typing them all out in a list like this, maybe you're doing something with like a map and you have, 100 different countries or something like that. Maybe you could find a text file that has all those countries in it and use the text file, read in the text file line by line, and append them to a list. Something like that's going to be quicker than typing them all out yourself. If it exists somewhere in a file, then you can implement that in and more quickly do that. Maybe you're doing something related to the 50 states or something like that, and you want a list of the 50 states or the list of the 50 capitals. There's got to be text files out there that already have it written out, or there's got to be some website where it's already written out where you copy and paste it into a text file. And then that you can very quickly write a little script. I did a video a couple weeks ago on reading text files. Read the text file line by line, append them to a list. You can get your inputs that way. All right, so you don't feel like you need to type everything out all the time. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the print statement. So either way you decide to do this, maybe it's not the letter, so maybe this doesn't work, but I want to show you guys something here. Instead of having to continue to go through each of these letters, right? What we can really easily do is just make a for loop. We already have a list of all the possible inputs. So what we're going to do is we're going to say for each input in let's not use input because that's a built-in function. So for each possible input in possible inputs, and then I'm just going to take one of these if statements and tab it in, and I can get rid of the other one. If I can see a pattern in my multiple if statements, then I can really easily adapt this into a for loop. So instead of putting a in here, I'm going to replace this with possible input, that variable. So if some input is my possible input, then look, I'm not going to do a was entered here, but I'm going to put in, I can use the dot format, or you can use concatenation here. Possible input was entered, right? Maybe you're looking for key presses, right? And there's look up Pygame possible key inputs. There's probably a variable that's all the possible inputs, and you can go through them to get different key constants. Or if okay, I just want to check, the key inputs for for my ASDW because I'm just making a character move, then it's Pygame dot I think it's like K underscore W or something like that, and then you would just do those 4 key presses, and then you could have a for loop that goes through each of those. Let's say you wanted something a little bit more. So let me first show what this does. Run this, and now you can see if I enter any letter, any lowercase letter, it actually tells me what that letter was. And if I don't input a lowercase letter, let's say I input a capital A, it doesn't. Oh, yeah, I have all the ASCII letters here. Sorry. Let's go back to lowercase here. And let's try that again. So now if I enter a capital A, it will not, right? So it didn't find that input. So I can more quickly go through there. Now let's say that you wanted to tie another piece of data to these inputs. So let's say that, for example, maybe you're doing key presses and you want to tie each key press to a certain function, or to a certain keyword, up, down, left, or right, or something like that. It may seem like there's not a way to do this with a for loop, but what you could essentially do is, I'm gonna do another example here. So, let's say that my possible inputs are my four key presses. I don't remember exactly what they are, so we'll just call them 4 variables. I'm just going to create these variables: up, down, right, and left. In Pygame, I think they're k pygame.k underscore up or something like that. You probably already have them in your code if you're using them. But basically, you would just put those variables into your possible input list. And then if you wanted each one to have some sort of a function, you could, one thing is you could just make your move, like let's say you had a move function later on that's going to move it based on the key input. Maybe here you just add a parameter that says input, and then in here you can have your, if input is up, if input is down, if input is left, if input is right. That can work. But another way of doing this would be, well, how do I want to adjust maybe the x or the y coordinates of that object when up, down, left, or right is happening? So maybe I can make another list of what each of these movements looks like. So for up, right, I'm changing the y coordinate and subtracting 1 to make it go up in the window. And then for down, I'm going to change the y coordinate to be +1, or whatever your move speed is. If you had a variable controlling move speed, then you could put that in. Left would would be moving the x -1 and keeping the y the same, and then right would be keeping x by 1 and then keeping y the same. And so now when I'm going through, for my possible input in possible inputs, and I go through and I check my key press. So, this is going to be inside of, if you're doing key presses, this would be inside of your event loop in Pygame. And so you would have, for each event, you'd be doing this, but you could just simply check, and you could say if that possible input is equal to the key, whatever the key event is. I don't have this set up perfectly, so just going to write a little bit of like pseudocode here. But if the possible input is that key event that you're checking, or maybe you want to write it the other way, key event is the possible input, then I don't necessarily have to say, okay, if it's equal to right, or if it's equal to left, or if it's equal to down. If these things are mapped together, what I can do is I can use the range function here instead of using the each loop here, and I can say for I in range, length of possible inputs, possible input equals possible inputs I, and then now I have not only the reference to the index, but now I can say, okay, if possible input equals key event, then I want to move, maybe I call my, whatever my object is, my game object, whatever I'm trying to move, maybe I call move, but I'm gonna pass in movement I. And so you can see what that will do. Let's just look at this code a little bit. Basically, if the user inputs input I, which would correspond to up, down, left, or right, whatever index that is, if it's 0, then it's corresponding to up, then movement gets passed the function, or these coordinates 0, -1, and your move function could just modify, like take this, basically this tuple, and add x and y in that order, and so it will work for all 4 of these cases. And so now I don't need, if possible input is key right, if possible input is key left, I don't need 4 if statements. I can just do this all in one. So that's another way of doing it, even if it's a little bit more complicated than just checking it here. All right. So I'm going to keep this video short and sweet this week. Maybe this will be helpful to make your code a little bit more concise. Maybe if you weren't sure how to do some of this stuff, and you were trying to come up with an algorithm for doing it, maybe this will help with that. So I do hope you find this video helpful. Remember that our create task is going to be due in about a week from now, so next Wednesday. So work on it the rest of this week, but also, hopefully you're getting close to finishing it up and are going to write the responses. So, all right, thanks everyone. I'll talk to you later.